Hello everyone, welcome to Microsoft Ignite. All the amazing people out there, all across the world, welcome. Today we are going to talk about Azure AI Fundamentals. We have very amazing Michelle, who is here to help us out and walk us through the whole content. And once we are done with that content walkthrough, we will have some more time for Q&A. So with that, Michelle, over to you.
Well, thank you, Vikas, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome to Microsoft Ignite. So today we have a very fun session where I'll be introducing you to artificial intelligence. So my name's Michelle. I'm an Azure Technical Trainer at Microsoft. Now, if you're wondering what an Azure Technical Trainer does, well, my team has actually been building out this bot to help answer queries just like that. So let me just pull the bot up. So this bot isn't public yet, so please don't try and access it. We're still building it out. With this bot, I can go and ask a question like, what is an Azure Technical Trainer? And give it a couple seconds. And here's the response from the bot. So Azure Technical Trainers, we're trainers that deliver Azure courses and content. You'll often find us, we call ourselves ATTs, teaching Azure classes, speaking at these events about Azure, making online contributions to the Azure community. So we ATTs, we all share a passion for learning, for teaching, and obviously Azure as well. If you want to find out more, there's a URL that points to a great LinkedIn article written by Scott, if you're interested in finding out what an ATT does. Now, let me just jump back to the slides. So you just saw a piece of AI there, a piece of artificial intelligence. And now you're wondering, what exactly is artificial intelligence? What is AI? And in the most simplest and basic terms, artificial intelligence or AI is essentially creating software or machines to imitate human intelligence, human behaviors, and human capabilities. And you might be wondering, what are these human capabilities? Well, they're things like being able to make decisions based on data and past experiences. So, as humans, when we grow up from, child to adulthood, we tend to make mistakes a lot. And, we learn from these mistakes. We get experience from these mistakes. And this helps us make better and more informed decisions, in the future. And so how do we get a machine or software to imitate that? Well, we feed it data, and this data essentially represents, the past experiences that we get. Another part of artificial intelligence is, how do we create systems to recognize abnormal events? So what I mean by that is, as humans, we tend to get this gut instinct or gut feeling that something's not quite right. Something's out of the ordinary. And so how do we create systems to, identify when something's unusual, abnormal, or, not quite right, and alert the right authority or the right agent to go investigate it, to really prevent, something disastrous from happening. Another part of AI or artificial intelligence is how do we get machines or software to interpret visual or audio input and understand that content. So by visual input, I mean things like images, things like video files. How do we feed that to a machine and get it to tell us what exactly is inside that image or in that video file? Audio, how do we feed it sounds and get the software or machine to, interpret the written or spoken context of the text or the speech that we pass it. And finally, engaging in dialogues and conversations. So you just saw with the bot demo that I just showed, that was engaging in the dialogue or conversation, not with a human, but with a piece of software. So using bots or AI agents, how do we get them to replace those tedious and typically boring boring and manual conversations that another human might not want to have. And so, you know, a classic case of this is customer support services. You know, rather than getting a human to work around the clock, you know, pulling those late night shifts, how do we use a bot to replace that so that we can still give the user, you know, 24-hour service without sacrificing some poor human's, you know, good night's sleep? Another part of artificial intelligence is machine learning, and you might have actually heard of this quite a bit. So machine learning, or ML, big buzzword along with AI. So machine learning is all about creating predictive models, and these predictive models essentially try to find relationships in the data. Now let's take a look at an example of how this works. So let's imagine we have some flowers, and these flowers represent a data point. And so this group of flowers is essentially our data set. And you might have, you know, noticed that these flowers are all different. They've got their own unique characteristics. So whether that's, you know, some flowers have more petals than others, you know, some flowers are colored, they might have different heights. So these are all unique characteristics of the flower. And that you know, the characteristics eventually determines what species or what type of flower these flowers are. And so we give them labels. And the characteristics in machine learning, we call that features of the data set. And the labels are sort of the outputs, the classes, the boxes that we want to map the input data to. And so, you know, with this data, we, you know, feed it into a machine learning algorithm. This machine learning algorithm, you know, learns. It's an iterative process. It learns sort of, we train it over time to learn those relationships, to map the input data that we pass it and the output labels that we assign it. And so once we train a model and we get a pretty good and accurate model, we can package that up and we can expose it as an AI service. So that means, you know, if I feed it a new image of a flower, for example, it's able to tell me or make a prediction as to, you know, what label, what species that flower might be. And so that, in a nutshell, is machine learning. Now, some of the more common artificial intelligence workloads that we've seen commercially been used quite a bit and successful over the past couple of years has been machine learning. So, you know, creating those predictive models based on data and statistics. So we see a lot of organizations, you know, hiring a team of data scientists to build their own custom machine learning models to make, you know, custom predictions for the organizational needs. Another one is anomaly detection. So this is all about, you know, creating systems to detect those unusual patterns or events, and then, you know, take preemptive actions on that. So an example is we actually use AI in Microsoft security. So we use AI to, you know, detect when there's maybe some malicious user activities going on. You know, is someone trying to sign in or attempt to log in many times and failing at it, or are they trying to log in from some, you know, unknown destination or location that we haven't seen before? And identifying those, you know, patterns and trends, we can, you know, notify the right agent to go investigate. To see, you know, if there's a breach in the system, or, you know, a malicious attacker is trying to get into our security systems. So computer vision, you know, creating applications to interpret visual inputs, you know, taking pictures or images from cameras or videos from cameras and feeding that into a computer vision model to get it to tell us, you know, what the content of that visual input is. And similarly, natural language processing. Now that's all to do with, you know, how do we feed machines or software, you know, a piece of text or some speech or audio files, and get that to interpret and understand and, you know, tell us exactly what's contained in that piece of text, what's been spoken, and what's inside, you know, that audio file. And finally, conversational AI. So that's really those AI agents and the bots, you know, that we use to engage in the dialogue and to, you know, have a conversation with us like you and I would. So if we take a deeper dive into computer vision, computers don't actually see pictures the way that we see things in the real world. So typically you might have heard pictures or image is actually made up of hundreds or thousands of pixels. And so these pixels are actually, if it's a colored image, it's encoded with a RGB value. So RGB stands for red, green, blue. And so each pixel, has an RGB value, which overall determines the color of that pixel. And then when we combine all these pixels together, we form an image. Now, these RGB values, we can represent them numerically, which means an image can be represented, as an array of numbers or as a list of numbers. And that is what we actually, use. That's the data that we use to feed to the computer vision models to train it to learn, these images over time. And so if we take a look at some of the applications of computer visions that we see, I'll start with image classification. So this is all about, how do we feed an image to software or machine and get it to tell us, or classify this image. So for example, you can see here, when we feed the computer vision model this particular image, it's classified it as a taxi because it's identified this is an image of a taxi. Now we can also do things like object detection. So with object detection, how do we feed an image to a computer vision model and get it to tell us, where exactly in the image is particular objects located in. So, it typically draws a bounding box on the objects that's detected. So we can see here, the bus is located near the top left corner. Cyclist is located near the bottom right corner of the image. So it draws this bounding box to detect where the objects are located in the image. With computer vision, we can do things like semantic segmentation. And this is all about, how do we find out, how do we get the computer vision model to tell us, which group of pixels belong to a particular object? How do we get it to tell us the outline of the object? And so if we do an overlaying on the image, you can see that all the pixels in the image that's been colored red, that represents, the bus object. All the ones, colored blue represents the car object. So that's semantic segmentation. We're also able to use computer vision to get it to tell us a story about an image. So that's image analysis, feeding that image into a computer vision model, we can get it to tell us, what's actually, in that image and tell us a story. So, for example, with this one, the computer vision model is able to identify, this is a picture of a person with a dog, walking on the street. We can also use computer vision to do things like face detection and face recognition. And this is actually a great use for verification purposes. So every morning when I open up my service laptop, I'm greeted with Windows Hello. And what Windows Hello does is it actually takes a picture of my face and it verifies that against, the face that they have an account. And then I can log in without having to type in a password or a PIN or anything like that. And so that's face detection and recognition. And finally, another part of computer vision is what's called optical character recognition, or OCR. So with optical character recognition, we can feed the computer vision model an image and get it to extract the text that's inside that image and display that text. So for example, we can see here, we've got some text in the image, and we feed it into a computer vision model, and it's able to tell us what that text is inside the image. Now, one of my favorite use cases of the computer vision services in Azure is the Face API that's been used by Uber. So for those who don't know, Uber is this app that you can use to book a car sort of on demand at any time, and that car will be here within 5 to 10 minutes to take you to your destination. And so what Uber did is they decided to use the Face API, which is part of Microsoft's Cognitive Services. So Microsoft Cognitive Services is the sort of umbrella of all our AI services. And so what Uber did is they integrated the Face API into their platform. And so that means, every time a driver is about to pick up a passenger, they actually have to open up the app and, take a picture, take a selfie of themselves, verify that, they are the driver on the account. And this gives passengers a peace of mind that, the driver coming to pick me up is actually the driver on the account. Take a look at some of the natural language processing services on the cognitive services. We've got things like text analytics. So text analytics, you can do a whole bunch of things. You can use text analytics to do language detection. And what that is, if I, for example, feed it a document or a paragraph of text, it's able to identify the predominant language in that paragraph of text or in that document. So for example, is this document written in English or French or Spanish? You can also use the text analytics API to do things like key phrase extraction. So key phrase extraction is, given a document or a paragraph of text, can it find the main subjects or key talking points of that paragraph of text or document. We can also do things like entity detection. So entity detection is, if we feed it, a paragraph of text, can it find out, the names and the brands and the location and maybe dates, all these entities that I might be interested in, and that I'm looking out for, and all these documents and all these text files. We can also use it to do sentiment analysis. So what sentiment analysis is, it scores a paragraph of text or a document, and this score essentially evaluates how positive or how negative a piece of text is. And so this is actually used quite commonly to, score customer reviews or comments made in online forums. So if you've ever, seen customer reviews or you've read comments before, that it can sway from very positive to very negative comments. So we can use sentiment analysis to essentially, score those kind of texts. In terms of the speech services, we've got things like the text-to-speech API and the speech-to-text API. So the text-to-speech API essentially, takes in text as input and then synthesize speech as output. And then vice versa, the speech-to-text API takes in speech or audio as input and then transcribes that into text and represents that in text as output. And so, for example, if you've turned on live captioning right now, it's actually able to take in my voice, my audio in real time, transcribe that into text, and then represent that as text on your screen in real time. Unless my accent is distorted a little bit, I don't know. So another part of our NLP services is our translation services. So we support both text and speech translation. So, if we feed it text or speech as input, we're able to translate that, and our translation services supports over 60 language translations. So we can translate that into another language, and then, output that as either text or speech. And finally, language understanding. So language understanding, we have a service called LUIS, which stands for Language Understanding Intelligence Services. I like the name LUIS, it's easier to remember. So LUIS allows you to build a custom language model. And if you're wondering, why would I need to build a custom language model? Well, think about, the way that we say things, even in English, there's a lot of different ways to say something where we actually mean the same thing. So, for example, if I say something like switch the light on, I can also say, turn the light on, and that means the same thing. Now, for a machine, how are they able to understand that what we just said is the same thing? So there's a lot of nuances and semantic structures and all that kind of stuff when it comes to the language that we need to really customize and build into the model for it to understand that, when we say things like these kind of utterances, that can actually mean the same thing. And so with LUIS, we pass it these utterances that a potential user could say or, give as a command. And then what it can do is it can pick out the entity, so sort of the subject of the utterance, as well as the intent. So the intent being sort of the action to sort of action on. So in this case, switch the light on, switch on is an intent. Turn the light on, turn on would be the intent. And you would actually have probably used this before. So if you've used any digital AI assistants like Cortana, Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant, we are able to command it and get it to do something. But the way that we feed those commands can all differ. And so they're actually built using their own custom language model to interpret the commands that we give it. So another favorite case of mine is actually Volkswagen Group. And so what Volkswagen Group did is, for those that don't know, they're a German automobile global car manufacturer distributor across the world. And so they have customers across the world. That means they're dealing with languages across the world, so they have a lot of language barriers to deal with when it comes to the car manuals and a whole bunch of documentations. And so before, they were using their own in-house translation service to do all the translations for their manuals and their documents, and it was a very manual process, and it kind of became a bottleneck when they grew and scaled. And so they turned to the Microsoft Translator API service, and they decided to automate that process. And now using the translation service, which is an AI service, they're able to generate these translations much faster to really help meet their scale and meet their demand and growth. Now, finally, conversational AI. So we saw this at the beginning with the bots. This is all about building those AI agents and bots to engage in a conversation or a dialogue with a human. And so if you're wondering, how my team built that bot out, well, we use services like QnA Maker Service. So what QnA Maker allows you to do is, create a knowledge base of question and answer pairs. So you can either input them from existing documents, they could be in Word or an Excel format, or even URLs, so web URLs. And they're able to, figure out which part of the document is questions and which part could consist of the answers. And then once you have, built out this knowledge base, you can service out a FAQ, a frequently asked question type of bot, using the Azure Bot Service. So the Azure Bot Service contains, the bot framework SDK to allow you to build your own bots and service that out through multiple channels. So a channel could be, you could use Microsoft Teams to service out your bot, or Skype to service out your bot, or Slack. And there's a whole bunch of other channels that it supports as well. Now, before I wrap up, I just want to touch on some of the Azure certifications. So if you're interested in, taking your Azure or AI journey further, then I would definitely highly recommend starting with the Azure Fundamentals, which is a course that takes you through the basics of cloud, the basics of Azure, what Azure is. If you don't know what Azure is, go take that course. And the new course that we're launching this year, which is called the Azure AI Fundamentals. And so the Azure AI Fundamentals course is sort of a one-day expansion on, everything I talked about just before and more. And if you want to, further continue your AI journey after that, then the next step up would be the Azure AI Engineer Associate certification that you can take. And this one actually dives a little bit deeper, specifically on Microsoft Cognitive Services, as well as the Azure Bot Services. Some more learning resources we've got. So Microsoft Learn is one that I definitely want to point out, because it's a platform that contains a lot of learning paths, and these learning paths are very well aligned to some of the courses and certifications that we offer. And so it's completely free to use, so you don't even need an account. It's publicly accessible. You just go to Microsoft Learn and start your learning journey there. We also offer training events. So if you go to Azure Events, you'll be able to find instructor-led events. They're typically offered as 1 or 2 day event courses, and we take you through the training for the entire day, or over 2 days, to get you skilled up so that you can set your certifications and exams, and get 100% success. And finally, so with Ignite this year, we're running a Cloud Skills Challenge. Now, just by signing up and joining this Cloud Skills Challenge, you actually get to earn a free Microsoft certification exam for free, and a chance to win exclusive experiences on Microsoft Learn. So if you're interested, go to myignite.microsoft.com/learning zone. And then just more resources to help get you started on your learning journey. So the learning path can be accessed via that link, as well as, if you're interested in signing up for some of our training days, there's a link there as well. So I think we've got a couple minutes for some questions and answers. Vic, is there any questions in particular from the chat that's coming in?
Thank you, Michelle. That was awesome. Yes, we have some really interesting questions coming through, and I have chosen a couple of them which I think are quite relevant for the session today. One key question I would like to pose first is, are there examples of AI being used, say, in Microsoft Teams?
Microsoft Teams, okay, that's a good one. Because I use Microsoft Teams quite a bit, it's in my day-to-day job, and I don't actually think about it. So yes, there is, and there's quite a bit. So let me think. With Microsoft Teams, so earlier this year we announced this feature where you can sort of upload an image and customize your background. Now that's an example of AI being used because we're using computer vision, right, to essentially take an outline of you and then keep that and customize your background with an image that you've uploaded. Another one would be, so I recently started, for those who might not be familiar with Teams, you can record your Teams meeting or Teams chat. And so at the end of it, you get your recording. And then I started noticing that I also got a transcript of my recording. Now that transcript has actually been generated using, our speech to text API, for example. So, it's taken the speech from the speech file from the meeting recording, and then transcribing that into text representation, so that at the end of the recording you get not only the meeting recorded, but as well as a text representation of the meeting, and then you can do really cool things with it, right? So imagine if I, pass that through the text analytics API and I extracted the sort of key phrases and entities from that meeting, then I can figure out the main, subjects from that meeting without even having to listen to the recording. What's another one? So. So the bot that my team has been building out. So the reason why I know this is because we were testing a lot of bot stuff. So I think I mentioned it before as well. You can service, if you've built out a bot, you can service that via Teams as well. So you can integrate AI services into Teams. Yeah, there's so many cool stuff that you can do with Teams.
All right, thanks for that. Next one is, what's the difference between the certs, two certs, AI engineer and data scientist?
AI engineer and data scientist. Okay, so the AI engineer associate certification really focuses on cognitive services and the Azure bot services. The Azure data scientist associate certification, that one takes a deeper dive into Azure machine learning services. I don't think we covered it in this session here, but Azure machine learning services is essentially a workbench or workstation for data scientists to come in and do their Azure their machine learning workloads in Azure, and so they can build and train and test and run their ML models in Azure. And so that course really specifically focuses more on that. And so that's sort of the difference between the two.
Sorry, forgot to unmute myself. All right, cool. I think that's pretty much it. If that's okay, I would like to take over back again now. Thank you. So with that, we would like to conclude for the day. I hope you found what you were looking for, and it was great to have you as well. There are some more questions on the chat window. We will endeavor to get them responded back as well. And this deck and the recording will be made available eventually. For your presence, for your engagement, we thank you a lot. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day and some more sessions on Ignite. Have a good day. Thanks, everyone.